check.
Hey.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Linda.
We're the Padgetts. Welcome to the Chris and Linda Show. We are big fans of marriage.
Yeah, we like talking about it, and we like inspiring people to know that they can have a better marriage than they've imagined, right?
Or thought.
All right.
So we're going to talk about a really happy topic
Right.
today,
Yeah. So happy. No, this is, I think it's just a sad topic. It's very sad, but it's a real issue in marriages today, and it's loneliness.
Loneliness in marriage. Mm-hmm. For some of you, this doesn't apply. And we're glad. We don't want this to be kind of a universally problematic scenario for marriages. But unfortunately, it is common and can be, we think it can be fixed, but you're going to have to work on a few things.
Right. So what is it? What's loneliness? How does that happen? You get married, you love each other, you're excited about a future, you start out doing things together maybe, and then before you know it, 20 years down the road, you're living these parallel lives that are not really sharing. They're not connecting. Your effort has been gone into raising children, building a career, finishing an education, making a home. So you have all this busyness that happens, which is great, and it's part of life. But in the end, you're just living parallel lives that and you're lacking that real emotional connection, and you feel lonely. You feel alone. You can be in the same room together and you feel alone. I've seen this in couples who, especially as they transition into retirement, you get couples, they fear retirement because it's, oh my gosh, what are we supposed to do when we have all this time together? Or you have military families who they retire or they're no longer deployed, and all of a sudden they're back home together. And what do we do now that we're here? And if that's not, dealt with early on, it leads to loneliness.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting is that, and I don't think couples really chew on it like this, but they've been practicing living two separate lives for most of their marriage. In the beginning, they have all of this effort and energy put into being together, sharing their story. They're constantly looking to each other as that consolation amidst the chaos that is their work life, their normal family life. That getting together, that being together with the person that just kind of gets them, knows them, sees them. It's really almost a crazy thought that a couple would have, thinking, I'll be lonely one day. That's impossible. Right. And I guarantee you that every couple that struggled with loneliness never thought that was going to be an issue in the beginning. Because in the beginning, you are disclosing so much of who you are, and you're dreaming together, and you're thinking about the possibilities in the future. But what happens is that this idea of the possibility of the future and then the future, all that's in between that is really two paths that seem to get further and further apart. And even couples that have stayed together and have found a sense of, connectedness together can still be a little bit overwhelmed with the reality of, as you said, retirement, and thinking, but I don't know if I want to be that together.
Right. I mean, I don't think we'll ever retire. But you can't wait for the kids to move out. You want to fill their bedrooms with books.
That's true. Very true.
I don't want that to happen. But you're like, we just want to be able to run around the house naked and not worry about kids. Yeah.
I know. I said that. Like, I want to walk around our property like we're Adam and Eve before the fall.
I just imagine all the mosquito bites. But let's not go there. So one thing that surprised us recently was information that you got from this trip in Australia, right? You want to tell that?
Yeah, so I had the chance about a year ago to spend some time in Australia. I did a lot of work with couples and their marriage prep program, and it was wonderful. And in one of the dioceses in Australia, I had a chance to interact with someone that had gone to a gathering where they were discussing, reasons for an annulment and divorce, and kind of the problems that they were seeing in couples. And she said that there were two primary points for this pursuit of an annulment and the divorce. Which, by the way, of course, an annulment is a church declaration that marriage was not valid in the first place, and a divorce is usually that civil action that basically separates the two, so that they're no longer married according to the state. But I was fascinated with this because there were these two primary reasons, and I immediately went to, well, it's got to be sex and it's got to be money, because that's the stereotypical two greatest problems in relationships for couples. And they said, yeah, you'd think that, but it's not. The two things that we're seeing increasing in terms of problems for couples is, one, lack of resilience. So they encounter a difficulty and a struggle and they're not prepared for it, and so they kind of just give up. And isolation, that idea of isolation or loneliness. And really, it resonates because on a biblical level, St. Paul is encouraging the older women to help train the younger women, and older men to be an example for the younger men. Like, there's this kind of familial, reaching into each other's lives and aiding and helping and assisting, which so often we're not really seeing. We have now the ability to reach more people than ever in terms of social media and online platforms, but it really is not necessarily creating this nurturing,
right.
Collaborative and familial state that we long for.
And of course, post-pandemic, it's even the loneliness in family members, family to family. We've seen the loneliness is epidemic in teens and children. So even though there's different aspects of loneliness, between, that we don't have other couples to hang out with, so that kind of loneliness. But it's the loneliness between a couple that we want to talk about, that even within this marriage that there's a loneliness, they feel alone in a marriage, that they no longer feel that connection. Now, there's actually been studies done on this, in UCLA's the Sloan Center did a study. It started, I think, back in 2002, but it went on for a while as they studied both couples who, like two-income couples or couples with children, couples without children. And across the board, what they saw was, on average, a couple only spent about 35 minutes a week in conversation. 35 minutes a week in conversation. And the vast majority of that conversation was like logistical. Like, hey, are you picking up the kids? What are we having for dinner? That kind of stuff. Not the real deep stuff. And that's very telling, because even though there's lots of other ways to build intimacy and to not feel lonely, but conversation is the absolute bare minimum. Like, good conversation is the bare minimum of two people feeling connected and not just living. I think that to me just shows the parallel. I like this idea of a parallel relationship. Two people existing in the same house, raising kids, contributing to the same livelihood, but not really connected.
Right. That whole idea of 35 minutes a week, I can't even comprehend that. Like, you almost have to on purpose not talk to each other for that to happen.
No. It's just, not on purpose. These people, they're busy. They're just busy, right? And there's other priorities, and they don't see. I think it's the idea that he knows I love him. She knows I love him. We're in this together. We're working on our family. A lot of what they're doing is well intended, right? That they have a reason for it. So it's not like they're trying to not talk. I think, right? It's just the way life is these days.
So how do we avoid that? Or how do we work towards solving this dilemma or this kind of epidemic of loneliness?
Right. So with clients, patients, all my vocabulary words that I use on a daily basis, with couples who are young, early married, right? We have a couple points that we want to make that would help prevent, in the end, that separation, that parallel, unconnected life. But even these points are very important for those couples who maybe you're at that point and you feel, I think your idea of the diverge, that separation of a journey, right? That starts out like this, where they're just a little separated, but if they're set just a little, that trajectory is just a little off, and then in 5 years, 10 years down the road, it just gets wider, 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 right?
Yeah, and what's interesting, because even in conversation with one of our kids, I remember saying that even in high school for us, we would, in classes that we didn't have together, we'd be writing notes to each other and would pass it to each other in the hallway. And even when we got home, after being on the phone with each other for as long as we were allowed, I would, and there is some proof that's embarrassing that is in existence, I would create tapes where I would just talk to Linda on my tape recorder and then give her the tape so she could listen to it at night. I mean, we even though we had this separate, part of our life, growing up in two different homes, obviously, and different classes in high school, and maybe she's doing the cheerleading and I'm doing, the most manly sport ever, the golf team. So we had parts of our life that were separate. We were still thinking about each other and wanting to interact with each other. And really, even in our early years of marriage, we did everything we could to try to be together, even though I was working 2 jobs and you were at home, raising the kids. And I mean, so you think about it, the 2 parts of our journey, that's a kind of a normal reality for couples. But in the early years, you do everything you can to try to make that, as you were
tethered
showing,
together,
as
right?
short and as, tight as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get creative with ways to communicate.
Right. But I think that the whole point here is that if you're in that situation where you have these deviated paths that have split wide open, these points that we want to bring in can help to bring that, to tether that back together and close that gap between the two. I think that's kind of what I was trying to say. Now, so I have some, I'm the type A. I like having things nice and clean and organized. We have an emotional, physical, intellectual, and spiritual points that I want to make here today.
Okay.
And
Good.
so emotionally, how do we retether a relationship that has become parallel but unconnected emotionally? And I think a big aspect of that is a deep sharing that deep person of who you are. Now that might scare the heck out of some couples who they're out of the habit of doing that. They're so into, this is what we're doing for dinner, this is who needs to pick up the kids, that the idea of a deeper sharing scares them to death. But that's so important to keep you feeling seen and heard and understood inside a marriage, so that you're not feeling lonely and isolated. So where do you start if you are afraid of doing that kind of deep sharing? I think that you start by sharing goals, dreams,
Your firsts.
your memories.
Yeah. In fact, I was thinking that one of the things that you can do if you need to baby step kind of back into this emotional sharing is see if you can remember one of the very first presents you got for each other, or see if you can remember your first Christmas together, or when you had your maybe your first child together and how everything changed. See if you can remember the different cars you had, the different places that you've lived, the different jobs that you each had. Try to ask questions about something that has an emotional connection. Get one of your early photo books and just see if you can reminisce about those earlier days together by looking at the picture. Oh, I remember that shirt. I got that shirt, and yada, yada. Those kind of things are really helpful, because maybe to think about just getting down and disclosing and bearing your soul to one another is almost that terrifying thought if you've been out of practice for so long. To get that ball rolling, you might need, kind of some things that will, induce certain triggers. So, making bread, in the early years, or the pursuit, because, we were on that we were on that obsession with, we have to eat as healthy as we can.
Right.
We were listening
but you
to this
never
guy.
baked bread.
I sure did eat it. It was pretty darn good.
I baked a lot of bread, but you never.
I know it. I mean, I remember, we wanted to get this really amazing grain.
It would make flour out of wheat berries.
Right. So this was a big deal because it was so expensive, the one that we wanted, which I don't even know if we ever
I don't think we ever did get it.
We had that same kind of thing with, we need to get this air purifier, and we're going to spend all this money on this air purifier, which we ended up getting a couple of those, or things so we have these things that are connected to stuff, but it also brings in a whole conversation with, oh, that's right, we went to that Joel Robbins whatever conference about eating well, or we got those books and your friends you would talk about.
Right. I think your point of looking at those pictures or thinking of those memories that are emotionally charged memories, right? Like birth of a child, vacation times, wedding, right? Those are emotionally charged events. And so looking at those pictures, talking about those events helps bring the emotions back, stirs those back up. To remember, we always say, that's a big point that we make in all of our talks that we do, all of retreats, pre-marriage or marriage retreats that we do, is this idea of remembering your firsts and how important it is. We come back to this often, but it's so important to remember where you came from. And it helps it's a deeper sharing that's comfortable because you're sharing something that happened, not necessarily something that's deep inside of you. That can be kind of scary. But I do think it's important to cross the line and to get into that deeper sharing. Like, what are you afraid of? Or even not like to sit down here, Chris, let me just tell you, here's all my deepest fears, but just to say that maybe, okay, we're going to go do this today and use the verbiage. Okay, we're going to go do that today, but I'm a little afraid of this, right? I'm a little afraid that we're going to be late. Okay. So using vocabulary words that evoke deeper content and not just like, so surfaced that not that I want to sit down and just divulge everything, but just to dip your toe into that deep area of, emotions very slowly, so, and then also sharing your faith with one another, like that deep, those deep conversations. And maybe you need to set aside time to do that. Those are so unifying. They tether a couple together so tightly to know those deep aspects of one another.
Right. So that emotional connection can look a lot of different ways for you as a couple, but you definitely have to be intentional about it. So the second is physical.
Yeah, physical. So how do you physically work on being less lonely?
Well, I think obviously, again, if we kind of use examples of young couples who are, in love, they are constantly touching. Not to be weird about it, but that's something that's probably pretty important to remember, that it's okay to hold hands or to, gently touch one another, or to, be on the lookout for opportunities for intimacy. I think what can happen is, we get so distracted with all the things that we have to do that we forget about the importance of touch. And I wish I could find this statistic, but there was just this need or this statistical importance of hugging and just how much a human person needs hugs. Oddly, I always get annoyed with that kid that's wearing the free or holding up the free hug sign at those conferences. That's not what we're talking about, obviously. No. But that's the idea of just being held and knowing that you belong together, that you kind of fit together, that physical expression. And I think that it's easy to get out of the habit of that. And there can be resentment because of that. If you're so busy that you don't find room, to express that physicality with one another, then unfortunately there can be resentment, there can be a coldness that's there. And unfortunately, it can also kind of lay the ground for future problems, such as adultery. But some of the ways that you can immediately kind of start working on this is simple as like sitting next to each other or holding each other's hands. Here's an example. We used to watch this television show, and the couple, whenever they would go places, would always hold hands, even in the car. It was kind of funny. And you've seen it before. Maybe you're on a beach somewhere and you're walking, and there's that older couple, and they're holding hands as they walk. And it's like, aw, because we know there's something about that physical connection that is important.
Right. And or if it's not that way, that the idea of the physical connection could be doing things fun together, having fun together, going on hikes or going on shopping sprees together, yard selling, cooking together, right? Some people, they like to cook together. Clean together. Wouldn't that be great? Too bad we both hate that. Yeah. But that kind of thing, doing something fun together, so that it's emotionally stirring. It stirs something within you that you're having fun, and this person is with you having fun. So isn't there a connection to people, that you're connecting to people when you both are having fun together? You automatically connect with them. So physically have fun, but also the touching, the holding the hands, the hugging, that's so important. Yeah.
It's like it's that idea of make a memory. You want to try to make a memory, and you can do that on a regular basis, and specifically where you go and how you do that. Those can have that physical connection points.
All right. So
Yep,
the next point is intellectually connected. There is something important about that mind meld, right? Intellectually binding together. And so the thought on this is to learn something new together. We have done this through the years. Our journey into the Catholic Church was a spiritual journey, but it was also a very intellectual journey. You read books, I read the books. We talked about the books. We listened to tapes together. It was very academic and intellectual. My schooling, your schooling, when you were studying for your master's degree, I was listening with you on that. We talked about those things, the things that you learned about. And then my schooling, same thing. I talk about what I'm learning. So there's that, we share on an intellectual level things. Even though we read very different type of books, you still talk about those books, and I talk about my books. We listen to books together. There's a lot of intellectual stimulation in our relationship, which is great and important. And I wish maybe one day we'll take a class together. That'd be kind of fun, like small engine repair. I think that would be, I know I would enjoy that. You probably would hate it.
I need that class.
You need that class, but I think I'd have fun with it. Yeah.
I do think that this idea of kind of intellectual pursuits, that's really important. And look, some of you might be like, I love rocket fusion and my spouse doesn't. Well, that's because they're normal. No, I mean, so maybe your field is completely specialized, and the things that you're learning, like only a few percent, of the people on the planet can even relate to you. Like, I'm into lasers. Well, oddly, Linda's a therapist and is really interested in all things psychological and therapeutic. And in some ways, I'm interested in why the human person does what they do. And my training's more in the theological arena. But what we found is that there's so much that on both sides of the fence of what we're passionate and interested in that there's a lot of crossing that goes along, and a lot of value in learning about that together. So we've listened to a number of books that maybe at first glance I would not pick up and say I got to read that, but after listening to them, like they're like 5-star reads, or reading them, you're like, my gosh, that's incredible. And I think that that's something that I would encourage here with this, all of them, emotionally, physically, intellectually, is to be open to something that's different than what you're used to. Because we know couples, for example, where he's really interested in golf, let's say, and she's never really done that. And so she's lonely because she's at home and he's out on the golf course. And our solution is get yourself some clubs and go out there with him. If this is so important to him, and you're in your kind of years of kind of winding up from the workforce, and retirement looks like him out, doing 18 holes of golf, and you at home and you're unhappy, then it's time for you to get into golf. But that also goes on the other side. If she's really interested and she wants to go to all of these like outdoor, craft, events, and
the stereotype here is.
But the funny thing is that we did that. Like you were doing some stuff for classes, so we went to a Native American big kind of outdoor festival.
I like festivals and activities.
I like doing awesome. Stuff. Yeah. And or to like some sort of a Scottish festival. We did that.
That's coming up
again. I love that.
Yep.
We had our big medieval nerd festival.
Love
we went to that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, because I'm kind of a little bit of a homebody introvert, and by homebody I mean going to thrift stores, buying books that I can bring home to me. But I think I wouldn't probably be inclined to say, let's go do all of these things, but because that's what you want, I'm doing it and I'm loving it, which I wouldn't have thought maybe that I would love it as much as I did. Like if you're open, you might find that there's a whole new world that would be open to you. And you just have to be willing to go on a little bit of an adventure.
All right. And then the final aspect is spiritual connection, having that spiritual connection. Again, this may be a point that some people are freaked out about. because it's
Right.
your spiritual life is the deepest part of who you are. To share that can be very, make you feel very vulnerable. But I know we talk a lot about praying together as a couple, but this is definitely a huge point in order to build that unity together. Yeah.
It's hard to talk about praying together or having a spiritual journey together if you're not going on that spiritual journey. So I think the first thing is to ask the question, where are you at in terms of this whole idea of a spiritual journey? And for many of you, you might say, I've really never done that before, or it's something that I'm not really kind of well versed in, so I don't even know where to begin. And the good news is that you were made for this. So what might seem like it's kind of this whole foreign concept and something out of your wheelhouse, it's actually part and parcel with who you are. You are a spiritual being. You are made for this. It's in fact, it's something that would be like a runner who's exhausted, has been out mile after mile, and they're so thirsty, and they just have not realized, what I need right now is I need a drink. I need to get something in that will kind of rehydrate me and give me the electrolytes and the things that I need so I can keep going. That's a lot of you out there. You're tapped out. You're dry. You haven't really grown in this area, and your body is craving that. So one of the good things to realize is that in the church, there are so many ways for you to start a spiritual journey. There are tons of prayers and novenas and just ways that you can grow spiritually, little gatherings where you can share insights with one another, whether it's a Bible study or a book study. But at the end of the day, you're in the right place if you want to grow spiritually, because the Catholic Church has been doing this for, a good 2,000 years.
So growing spiritually, yep, prayer, going to Mass together, going to confession together, reading those spiritual books together. In a lot of ways, you can do all that. The having the fun, the physical can be connected to the spiritual. The intellectual can be connected to the spiritual. The emotional can be connected to the spiritual. Because really, in the end, the spiritual is all of that.
That's right.
Because it comes from all of that. So again, loneliness in marriage, a topic that we hope that people don't struggle with, but we know that they do.
Right. So hopefully this helps. If you have any other thoughts or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below, or send us an email, chrisandlindapaget@gmail.com. We're so grateful that you're here. If you have any questions, you can certainly send them along to us. If you have any ideas for podcasts and topics that you want us to explore, please send that to us as well. We certainly could use your help. We are inviting any and all who have a passion for marriage to get involved, whether it's through praying for us and the ministry that we have, or supporting us financially, or even finding ways to help get the message out there. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We sure would appreciate it, and we value you and thank you in advance. Though this is a completed episode, we have so many more to come, and we hope to see you soon.